वाले मोहम्मद सलावत
Recite a salawat, please. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Inshallah, tonight we will continue with Khutbatul Muttaqeen that we were discussing. We started this discussion before last week, in which Ali ibn Abi Talib describes to his companion Hammam the different characteristics of those who are pious, the true believers in the eyes of Amirul Mu'mineen. And of course, these days that we are going through is one of the dates that's also mentioned for the Shahada of our beloved 9th Imam, Imam al-Jawad, salawatullahi alayhi. So inshallah, as we bring the program to an end, the lecture portion at least, inshallah, we will commemorate the Shahada of our beloved Imam with a short masa'ib as well. I was so busy preparing for tonight's program that I forgot to wear the appropriate attire. I should be wearing something dark, but you will forgive me for that. Inshallah, we'll continue. We ended here. Ali ibn Abi Talib was describing for his companion Hammam. He said, فَالْمُتَّقُونَ فِيهَا هُمْ أَهْلُ الْفَضَائِلِ. These pious servants of Allah, these true believers, as we have given the title to them, they're the type that have virtues with them. The more you get to know them, the more you spend time with them, the more you actually want to be around them. Some people, the more you get to know them, the more you want to distance yourself from them. Sometimes, no, it's the opposite of that. The more you get to know someone, you say, I want to spend more time with you. And your bond becomes stronger, and the friendship becomes even stronger, and you start to trust this person even more than you trusted him before. We said the muttaqun, the pious servants of Allah, they are not necessarily famous individuals. But if there is an opportunity for you to get to be able to know them, like you run into them somewhere, or you happen to work with them, for example, or they happen to be your relative where you're spending time with them, their character will draw you closer to them. And I said this last time as well, I will re-emphasize this as well today, that if you and I, as individuals who attend these programs, at the end of the day, we say we are practicing individuals. Yes, we call ourselves Muslims, we call ourselves individuals who are trying to be pious at the very least. This is one of the most important litmus tests that you can put yourself through. Is my character the type of character when people get to know me, they want to spend more time with me? Or is it the opposite? No. I have friends, they get to know me, after 6 months, a year, they don't want to spend time with me anymore. Yes? This is one of those litmus tests that we have in Quran and Hadith. Then he moves on to the next line. He says, the first characteristic that Ali ibn Abi Talib points out about these individuals, in particular, outside of the idea that they are people of virtues, yes? What are these virtues that these individuals have? This is the first one. It is such an important one as well. He says, these individuals, mantiquhum as-sawab. These individuals, their nutq, their speech is appropriate speech. When they speak well and they speak appropriately. And he just says this one line is 2 words or 3 words put it together, mantiquhum as-sawab, and he moves on. But other verses of the Quran and other hadith have a lot to say about the way you speak to others. Because if you think about it, the way that we interact with one another, the primary way that we interact with one another is what? Is the way we speak to one another. Yes? Yes, you might hug this person, you might greet this person. At the end of the day, 99% of your interaction with another person is what? Is the way you speak to another person. This is the importance and the significance of the tongue and what this tongue can do. And therefore, in Quran and in Hadith, you find that Islam shows us 2 sides to this tongue. This tongue can do the greatest of things, it can do the worst of things. This little piece of flesh, yes, that has, 8 to 10 different muscles. That's why you can move it in so many different directions. This little piece of flesh that we underestimate, it can do the greatest of things, or it can ruin lives. The tongue. He says, the first thing Ali ibn Abi Talib pointed out was what? They pray like this, they fast like this. No, those are important. No one prayed better than Ali ibn Abi Talib, yes? But the first thing he points out is what? When they speak to one another, they speak well. They speak appropriately to one another. Okay. When you look at Quran and Hadith and you try to get an understanding of what are the great things that this tongue of mine can do, what are the horrible things that this tongue of mine can do, you find Hadith after Hadith after Hadith. Verse of the Quran after verse of the Quran speaking of this issue. Those good things that the tongue can do, here is one of them. Amongst those good things that the tongue can do is that it can beautify the character of an individual. You spend time with someone, if someone speaks well, if they have manners when they speak, you are automatically drawn to that character. And in some careers, you will see this, it manifests itself a little bit more, right? Sometimes, for example, in some careers, the profession itself, it necessitates that this person speaks well and he speaks with the proper manners. You're automatically drawn to that character, even though you don't really know him. You don't know him too much. That's why the Prophet has said, Salawatullahi alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says, Al-jamalu fil lisan. He says, beauty lies in the tongue, in the way he speaks. You see sometimes people, their appearance may not be the most attractive, yes? But he speaks in such a beautiful way, with such manners, that you're so drawn to this character, right? Sometimes you talk about youngsters who are getting married, they just look at what? Just appearance. No, character. Character can make a normal appearance look awesome. You spend time with this person, he speaks with such manners, she speaks with such manners, all of a sudden, this person is so much more, you want to be around this person all the time. He says, Al-jamalu fil lisan, you can beautify your character with it. What else can I do? You can bring happiness to another believer. Can bring happiness. This concept is called idkhal as-surur, bringing happiness to another brother or sister of yours. And I cannot emphasize how much hadith has emphasized this, that you bring happiness to others. How am I going to do that? I don't know. You get creative with it, yes? Sometimes the smallest comments can bring so much happiness to the person that you're living with, to your loved ones. It's the smallest of things. I usually say this. I say burnout, when we talk about burnout, especially in relationships, especially in the household, burnout doesn't happen necessarily because there's a lot of work. Sometimes that's the case. Most times, it's because there's no gratefulness. Because nobody takes the time to bring a little bit of happiness to one another. You went through all this trouble to you today. Thank you so much. I appreciate what you have done for me. Idkhalus surur, bringing happiness to one another. Yes? You don't do that, then this person feels like they worked 40 hours today. They worked 8 hours, even that's a lot. But they feel like they worked how much? 40 hours today. Idkhalus surur, you bring happiness. So what happens when I bring happiness to my brother or sister? That you do, by the way, through your tongue. That's the primary way to bring happiness, yes? To your brother or sister. Take a look at these ahadith. These are not small claims. that the sixth Imam is making. Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullahi alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أنا أبي عبد الله قال لا يرى أحدكم إذا أدخل على مؤمن سرورا. He said, don't you ever make this mistake that when you bring happiness to another believing brother or sister, don't ever assume that you are only bringing happiness to him. أنه عليه أدخله. That you're only bringing happiness to him. Don't make that mistake. So, what else is going on then? I made this person smile. I said something wonderful about them. I made him happy. What else is there? Is there something that changed in the world all of a sudden? Imam al-Sadiq is saying, yes, something changed in the world all of a sudden. You just didn't pick up on it. He says, don't make that mistake that you're only making him happy. So what then? Ya ibn Rasulullah. He says, Bal wallahi alayna. He says, when you make him happy, know that you made us Ahlul Bayt happy. When you made him smile, you made your Imam smile. There's a lot that's going on when you bring happiness to another person, yes? He says, don't make that mistake. You just saw him smile. No, he smiled. Because of his smile, we smiled. And then he says, Wallah ala Rasulillah. And you brought happiness to the heart of the Prophet as well. Imagine if you live life, if I live life with this perspective. That small comment that I make in the morning, yes? Good morning. I hope you have a great day. Whatever it is in your own context, for someone else it might be something else, right? These are just examples we give. Imagine if you said that and you were saying good morning to the Prophet. Changes your perspective altogether. He said you are bringing this happiness also to the Prophet as well. And then in another hadith, Imam al-Sadiq describes for us what happens to a believer on the day of judgment, because in this world he brought happiness to the heart of another person. He says on that day, people are resurrected from their graves. The day of judgment, we've heard a lot of scary things about it normally, yes? It is scary for some people. For some people, it's not scary. This person who brings happiness to the heart of his brother or sister, it's not like that for him. The hadith says, إِذَا بَعَثَ اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنَ مِنْ قَبْرِهِ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises this believer from the grave. And it's the day of resurrection. You've heard maybe on the day of resurrection, Yawm al-Qiyamah, everyone is worried about themselves, yes? There's no one to worry about you. This is the way we've been taught about the day of judgment. It's scary. Everyone is running about their own thing. Relatives don't care about one another. All the connections you had don't work here anymore, and so on and so forth, yes? But then if you are the type of person who brought happiness to others, things are a little different. He says he will raise the mu'min from his grave. وَخَرَجَ مَعَهُ مِثَالٌ يَقْدُمُ أَمَامَهُ. But when he is raised or risen from the grave, in front of him, another individual will be walking. Another person who has the shape and the form of a human being will be walking in front of him. يَقْدُمُ أَمَامَهُ. So what does he do? كُلَّمَا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنَ هَوْلًا مِنْ أَهْوَالِ يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. Every time this believer, he looks on the day of judgment, he sees one of the punishments, he sees one of those things that are supposed to be scary. Those things we've heard of, the earthquake, for example, and the mountains are disintegrating and they are imploding, and so on and so forth. All the descriptions that we have, right? وَإِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ, and so on and so forth. Every time he sees one of these scary events taking place, the hadith says that this individual who was walking in front of him, what does he do? He turns to this mu'min. قَالَ لَهُ الْمِثَالِ لَا تَفْزَعْ وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. Don't be scared, don't be worried. The Quran says, وَلَا تَخَفْ وَلَا تَحْزَنْ وَلَا هُمْ خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Yes, khawf and huzn. Khawf means you're sad, or khawf means you're worried about something in the future. Huzn means you're sad about something right now. He says, لا تفزع. Don't be sad. ولا تحزن. And don't worry about anything either. We'll take care of it for you. Every step of the way. Okay. He continues. And he says, وَأَبْشِرْ بِالسُّرُورِ وَالْكَرَامَةِ مِنَ اللَّهِ. I'm here to give you the good news that you're going to be good today. You'll be fine today. There is going to be an honoring of you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have nothing to worry about. This is odd. Who is this person who's walking in front of him? That's the question I have. I don't know about you guys. What is this thing that keeps walking in front of him, opening the path almost, as if he has like a cheat code, just opening the doors for him? Yes? Okay, he continues. حَتَّى يَقِفَ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَ. Until he comes to that point where they have to actually do the accounting of his own deeds. So that's the most critical part. Now you're getting to the point where you're standing in front of the judge. Standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happens in that moment? فَيُحَاسِبُهُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does His judgment very easily, quickly. Sometimes you want to meet with someone who's supposed to check your documents, right? If the interview takes a long time, what do you say? You say it was very difficult. He went through everything. If he wraps it up in 5 minutes, it's like, this was wonderful. This is what hisaban yasira means. He takes a look, he says, yeah, you seem to be good to go. Oh, all this, my whole life, they said the day of judgment, they get all into the details. Not everybody. Some people have hisaban yasira. Goes very easy for them. Okay. So he gets through this part of the trip as well, so to speak, or he gets through this part of Qiyamah as well. وَيَأْمُرُ بِهِ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ. And he is commanded that you are to now enter into heaven. So he's entering into heaven, right? وَالْمِثَالُ أَمَامَهُ فَيَقُولُ لَهُ الْمُؤْمِنُ يَرْحَمَكَ اللَّهُ. At this point, this mu'min, now he's done. He turns to this mithal and he says, may Allah have mercy on you. How great are you? خَرَجْتَ مَعِي. You left my grave with me. You were there with me every step of the way. You told me I would do well. And I did well. The judgment went so easily. The interview went so easily. He has one question. He says, Man ant? Who are you? You never introduce yourself. Who are you that you're walking in front of me? You open the doors for me so easily. Take a look at what this other individual says. He says, فَيَقُولُ. He responds, أَنَا السُّرُورُ الَّذِي كُنْتَ أَدْخَلْتَ عَلَىٰ أَخِيكَ الْمُؤْمِنِ. I'm that happiness that you brought to the heart of your brother or sister. You remember that time when he was stuck? You remember that time when you made that short comment and you brought a smile to his face? You remember that time he was sad, but you sat and you heard his pain and you acknowledged it and you comforted him. I'm that happiness that you brought to the heart of your brother. This is what I can do for you on the day of judgment. Yes? He says, I am that happiness في الدنيا. خلقني الله عز وجل منه لأبشرك. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from that deed of yours, created me just so that I could be here on a day like this, so that I could give you glad tidings after good news, as you're walking through this difficult path on the day of judgment. Some people, they use their tongue for this type of stuff. Then there are people who use their tongue for the opposites. This is the scary part. And hadith says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes no part of the body the way He punishes the tongue. And the hadith responds on behalf of the tongue, almost as if the tongue is alive by itself, yes? And we know our limbs are alive, in fact, because the Quran says on that day, they respond on behalf of people. So the hadith says on that day, this tongue, he raises objection, concern to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, why is this? Now, does this actually happen, or is just the hadith telling us this way so we can understand it better? Separate discussion. It might be more so of a metaphor that he actually has this conversation or not, yes? But he says, Ya Allah, why are you punishing me like this? I mean, this hand did some sins too. These feet, they walked to places they weren't supposed to walk to. These ears, they listened to certain types of music that are haram, that they weren't supposed to listen to. These eyes, they saw things they weren't supposed to. I mean, why me? He says, you know what the problem with you is? Hadith from Al-Kafi. He says, the problem with you was that when you committed a sin, in other words, when that person committed a sin through you, yes? You said one word, and that one word ruined the lives of people on the west and the east. He said one word with you, and people's livelihoods were ruined. People's reputations were ruined. Your punishment is different. Why? Because the impact of the sin is so much bigger. And this is why Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi, in his sharh on this khutbah, yes, he counts 7 different reasons why the sins of the tongue are more dangerous than the sins of the other limbs of the body. And the seventh of them, and we don't have time to go through all of them, I'll mention the seventh of them. The seventh of them is that the sins of the tongue, more often than not, they will involve another servant of Allah. It's usually haqqun nas that you're dealing with. I might listen to something haram, God forbid, but this is what? This is the right of Allah that I'm violating, and I should repent from it. I may not, for example, I don't know, I don't pray, for example. This is a sin. But when it comes to the tongue, what happens? It's usually when I'm interacting with another person. So this is the wonderful thing that the tongue can do. These are the terrible things that the tongue can do. And so when you go into Quran and Hadith, they will tell you, these are the things that you have to be careful. Two of them I will mention, and inshallah we'll be wrapping up. Number one is that you do not speak too much. Speaking too much is a problem. It has a number of issues. Sometimes when children, I hope I say this, it doesn't create any problems. Sometimes when children don't want to listen to parents, it's not just because they're children and they might be, still the maturity is growing and it's not their own. Sometimes it's because this father or mother cannot get the message across in 2 minutes. It has to be a 30-minute lecture. Sometimes it's because of that. No. Short, to the point. What you did is not acceptable in our house. That's it. End of story. Yes, your friends might do other things. That's why they live in other houses. In this house, this is what we do. And the mother and the father have to be on the same page. If they're not, that's a can of worms. They have to be on the same page. Sometimes when husbands and wives can't sit and talk to one another, it's because if they were to sit and talk to one another, this wouldn't be a 5-minute talk. It would be what? A 2-hour talk all of a sudden. Sometimes marriage does require that, yes? Sometimes it doesn't though. Sometimes it's something you have to tell this person, I wasn't happy with what you did, and we've talked about this before. You already know what I'm going to say. That's it. And you move on. This speaking too much. What happens? People don't take you seriously anymore. Yes? You have an opinion on everything. People don't take you seriously anymore. That's number one. When you look at the khutbahs of Nahjul Balagha, take a look at how short they are. They're very short. We explain them, but if you were to look at the khutbahs themselves, how short are they? If I were to read the words of just Ali ibn Abi Talib when he's delivering this khutbah of Muttaqeen, we'd be over in 10 minutes, maybe less. Less than that. This is a sermon. It's done. Short. Get the point across. That's number one. I won't spend too much time on that because that's a little bit more evident. Number two, when someone comes to you and speaks to you of their problem, of their difficulty, don't make that conversation about yourself. Someone comes to you, says, I'm dealing with this problem. Imagine this person responds in this way, reacts in this way. Oh, this is nothing. I've had to deal with 10 times worse than this. No, this conversation was about them. You want to bring comfort to that person, not change the conversation and make it about yourself and bring comfort to yourself. I've seen this happen so many times. Someone comes to an elder and says, this is nothing. Let me tell you about my problems. You can tell him about your problems, but right now we're talking about his problems. He came to you to seek some comfort from you, yes? And this is the concept of tasalli that we have in Islam. In Islam, when someone comes to you, if you can comfort them, this is one of the greatest acts of worship that you can do. But can you comfort someone if the moment they come and tell you about something, you now want to tell them about what you were going through? Can you do that even? Sheikh, I lost my loved one. Oh, no problem. Let me tell you about my friend. Not only he lost his father, he lost his mother as well. What is this? This is comforting this person? You change the whole conversation. It's not even about him anymore. He feels embarrassed to even share his pain with you now. No, when people come to you, you listen to them, you take in their pain, you acknowledge it, you comfort them. If you have something to offer, if you have a pain you're going through, that's for another time. You can also share. That's a sign of a good friend, that when it comes time for you to share, they'll sit and listen as well. That's a sign of a good friend, by the way, yes? But that's for another time. Right now, this person is sharing with you. Why do I say this? Because even the Quran, when it speaks to the prophets, comforts the pain of the prophet. It doesn't say, Ya Rasulullah, listen, what is this stuff? You're going through a hard time. Forget about this stuff. There's going to be a day of judgment, you'll be fine. Forget about it. This is what the Quran says? Or does the Quran say, وَالضُّحَى وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى Ya Rasulullah, we have not left you alone. Yes? أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. You remember you were an orphan. We took care of you. وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى. You had no wealth. We granted you Khadija. She gave you all this wealth. Yes? وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى. Ya Rasulullah, don't worry. وَلَا تَحْزَنْ. When they speak, don't let that make you upset. Don't let that make you sad. These are verses of the Quran I'm quoting. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing here? He is acknowledging the pain of the Prophet. And He is comforting him. And yes, He does tell him that other prophets went through similar things. Yes, but He doesn't do it in a way to dismiss the pain that he already has. That's number two. There are a number of other points we have to take into consideration when speaking to one another. Inshallah, we will leave for the following week. If we can dim the lights, inshallah, we'll take a couple minutes to take our hearts to the city of Medina and the city of Baghdad, where our beloved ninth Imam has now entered into the city of Baghdad, and he has been given of this poison that the Khalifa of the time has given to Al-Imam Al-Jawad. Sallallahu alayka, Ya Imam Al-Jawad. The narrator says, Ismail ibn Mehran, he says that when Imam Al-Jawad wanted to leave the city of Medina and he wanted to go to Baghdad, the first time when the Caliph called him, he says, I turned to Imam Al-Jawad. I said, Ya Muhammad Al-Jawad, if you're going to go to Baghdad, I'm worried that this Caliph will take your life. Tell us who the next Imam is so that we will know who to go to if something were to happen to you. And he says, the Imam turned to me and he smiled. He said, no, this time nothing will happen to me. This time you have nothing to worry about. He says he went on this trip to Baghdad and he came back. This second time, Mu'tasim called him back again. He summoned him again. This time he says, I asked Imam Al-Jawad again. I said, Ya Imam Al-Jawad, I fear that Mu'tasim will take your life this time. Would you tell us who the next Imam is? He says, the moment I said this, all of a sudden I saw tears started to roll down the face of Imam Al-Jawad. And he continued to cry until these tears entered into his beard. And he says he turned to me while he was crying and he said, Ya Ismail, this little son of mine, Ali, this little son of mine is going to be the next Imam. Because this time when I go on this trip, there is no more coming back from this trip. Imagine the pain that Imam Al-Jawad has in his heart. Imagine the pain that Imam Al-Hadi has when he knows that his father is going on this trip. This is the last time that he is going to see his father. They say Imam Al-Jawad left the city of Medina. He came to Baghdad. He was given poison to drink, according to some narrations, by his wife Fadla. And then this poison started to affect the body of Imam Al-Jawad. Imagine the pain that the Imam is going through. Imagine how this body starts to melt away. At the young age of 25, Imam Al-Jawad is leaving this world. Until Imam Al-Jawad takes his final breaths in the city of Baghdad, in this ghurbah, in this loneliness. This reminds us of another martyr who also grew up without a father. Imam Al-Jawad grew up without his father, Imam Al-Rida. You find another martyr on the 10th of Muharram. He also grew up with no father as well. And that was none but Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Qasim ibn al-Hasan, his masa'ib on the 10th of Muharram are amongst the most difficult and the most painful for Imam al-Hussein. They say on the night of the 10th of Muharram, Hussein gathered his companions. And amongst these companions, you had those of them who were strong, they were confident, they were powerful. They had Abu al-Fadl Abbas, and you had Ali and al-Akbar, and then you had these children. And Qasim was amongst these children. They could barely find even armor for Qasim ibn al-Hasan on the 10th of Muharram. And Hussein speaks to the companions of how each of them will leave this world the next day. They say Qasim ibn al-Hasan raised his hand, Uncle, will I leave this world the next day as well? Will I have shahada as well the next day? And you can see in the eyes of Hussein, though he is proud of Qasim, you can tell deep down he is crying already because he knows what these people will do to this young child. He knows what these people will do to Qasim, who is 12, 13, 14 maybe years of age. At this point, Hussein turns to Qasim and says, Qasim, son of my brother, yes, you will taste Shahada tomorrow as well. There came the 10th of Muharram. On that day, Ali al-Akbar had already gone to the battlefield. Then they say they started to hear the footsteps of Qasim ibn al-Hasan entering into the tent of Hussein. The narration says the moment Hussein and Qasim, they locked eyes, they both started to cry and cry heavily until they fainted. They almost fell there. And they continued to cry and cry until they came back. And Hussein started to hug Qasim. He said, Qasim, I can't give you permission to leave. You're the son of my brother. You're the trust. You're the amana of Hassan. And of course, Qasim is here to take permission. Qasim is here to get that permission to make his uncle proud on a day like this. They say he started to leave the tent when Hussein gave him permission. The narration says there were still tears on his eyes when he left out of the tent and he started to come towards the battlefield. Imagine this young man, they can barely find armor for the body of Qasim. He entered into the battlefield. He fights left, he fights right, until the narrator from the army of the enemy says, one of the troops on that side looked at Qasim. He said, I will put the pain of losing this child in the heart of the mother of this child. I will put an end to the life of this child today. The narrator says, I turned to him. I said, he has enough to take his life anyway. Why do you want to take the life of Qasim? He said, he's fighting like this. I want to put an end to this. And as Qasim is fighting in the battlefield, the narration says that he attacked him and he struck him upon his head. And Qasim ibn al-Hasan, according to one narration, fell to the ground with no hands to support him. He fell to the ground with his face. And in these moments he called out, Ya Amma. In these moments he called out, Uncle, come to the aid and assistance of me. They say Hussein ran out of the tents the way he had never ran before. He came and he sat beside the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. The army of the enemy started to split open for Hussein. He sat by the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. And in those final moments, the only thing that narrations tell us is that Hussein turned to this little child. He said, Qasim, it's so difficult for me when you call my name, but I'm not able to do anything for you. It's so difficult for your uncle when you call his name, but he's so far away from you. He can't do anything for you in those moments. And the narrator says, I could see Hussein sitting by the body of Qasim while Qasim was pushing his feet into the sands of Karbala. And then he carried Qasim ibn al-Hasan on his chest all the way back to the tents where he buried the body of Qasim ibn al-Hasan. Only Allah knows what went through the heart of Hussein on the 10th of Muharram. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq to be amongst the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are dealing with pain and difficulty, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees them from their difficulty and pain, inshaAllah. And finally, last but not least, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam, bin Nabiyyi wa alih, rahimallahu man qara'a al-Fatihata ma'a as-salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Inshallah, we'll have the recitation of Dua Kumail, and afterwards we'll end with ziyarat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. Everyone. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها، اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفعه بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك. ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته، وكم من فادح من البلاء أقلته، وكم من عثار وقيته، وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط به سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بجنايتها ومطاني. يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءته ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك؟ أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات، أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيته، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك. يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا كريم، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثوه، يسير بقاؤه، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته، أم لطول البلاء ومدته؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج الآملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أتباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلمه ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أتباقها وأنت تعلمه صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله، أو بر تنشره، أو رزق تبسطه، أو ذنب تغفره، أو خطأ تستره. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيته، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة، وبخدمتك موصولة، وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، واعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا يا سريع يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وفعل بي ما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. زيادة.
Please recite Surah Fatiha for the following of tonight's Siraj sponsor with a loud salawat. Allah.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته، السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.